All right, so this presentation is what is new in Swedish research using ArkivDigital. Now, ArkivDigital is an online subscription service that provides access to the Swedish historical records. Now, you can get ArkivDigital if you go to a family history library in Salt Lake City or go to family history centers throughout North America. There are some libraries throughout the country that do subscribe to the service. Again, it consists of 3 parts. The first part is the archives, where you can find the church books, court records, passenger ship manifests, tax records, scanned books, and many other types of archives. Today, there are nearly 91 million newly photographed colored images, or 182 million pages of Swedish historical records. Now, our big emphasis is really indexing these records so you can search by names, such as the Swedish church books, the estate inventories, the passenger ship manifest. So it makes research much simpler and much faster. And today we have 246 million searchable posts. We also have a family tree where you can document your research. So I'm going to be talking about the ArkivDigital updates during the past year. Because of the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of filming, but we did add some records to the Swedish-American church book collection. But again, our biggest emphasis was on indexing records. And if you were reading our blog or seeing our post on Facebook, you would notice that there was almost an update done every single week. So I'm going to be talking about the Swedish church book indexes, the estate inventories, and also the census indexes. So first of all, we'll look to the updates to the Swedish-American church books. Now, these are newly photographed color images of the Swedish-American church books. They're not scans of the microfilm. And our primary emphasis so far has been in the Midwest. Our largest collections are in Iowa, where we have 88 congregations, Kansas, which is very complete, 100 congregations, Minnesota, 125, which represents about 25% of the Swedish-American congregations in Minnesota. Nebraska is almost nearly complete, 120 congregations, few surrounding states, but then we added some records for Colorado. To find these Swedish-American church books, you go into Archive Search, and then you select the country of the United States. And you see that we have 467 archives. You can limit the search by the state. In this case, I did it for Colorado. So we have a few in Denver, in Boulder, and also in Golden. I opened the archive for the Augustana Lutheran Church in Denver. And here we have some, you'll see the number of archives. Volumes are 31. And these include congregation records, which are like membership books. Then there's birth records, death records. There's also moving in records, also some anniversary bulletins and other types of records. And again, this will vary by congregation. Some have more, some have less, but these are quite nice records. So here's an example of a congregation book at the Augustana Lutheran Church in Denver. And this is for Nils Nelson. And Nelson, N-E-L-S-O-N, is the American name, shows his birth date of April 6, 1865, and the birthplace is Verestad, Sweden. Gives his marriage date as June 24th, 1897, and he joined this church on June 1st, 1890, and it shows that he immigrated from Sweden in 1880, and then it follows with the information about his wife and then their children. Now, sometimes in the Swedish-American church books, the dates are in American format, and sometimes they're in European format, so you need to be cautious when you're looking at the dates. In order to jump the pond, you really need to know where your ancestor came from, what parish. And there's many different sources that usually people outside of Sweden look at, but in North America, one source can be the Swedish-American church books, because here we have a birth date and we also have the parish. So we have all the information that we can use in order to jump the pond. So we will look at him a little bit further. So we're doing, again, we're indexing the Swedish church books and also the estate inventories. And the Swedish church books actually begin in the 1600s, primarily late 1600s, up until 1991. And the key books for genealogical purposes are the births and baptisms, banns and marriages, deaths and burials, moving in and moving out records, and the household congregation, which is a yearly update of everyone living in the household. And often these are called the Big Five. Now within ArkivDigital, we have these church books from the earliest times up until the law of privacy. And within Sweden, the birth, the death, the household records are prohibited from being published online if they are younger than 70 years. So the cutoff year is 1951. So these are the church book indexes. The population of Sweden, 1800 to 1947 for the household congregation. We have an index for the births, and one for the marriages, and one for the deaths. To find these indexes, you go into index search, you go into index source. The population of Sweden, 1800 to 1947 is the one for the household. And then if you click down, you can see birth, marriage, and death. Okay. The population of Sweden, 1800 to 1947, is a name searchable index of all the household examination and congregation records between 1800 and 1947 for all of Sweden. 147 years. And this was created in partnership with MyHeritage. And again, very little immigration happened before 1840. So if you have a Swedish ancestor, there is a very high likelihood that this person will be in this index. It's the largest name index in Sweden, 165.8 million post. It also includes the Stockholm Rotmans archive from the years 1878 to 1926. Why is this important? Because in the large parishes within Stockholm, they stopped creating household records in 1878. Instead, there was a Stockholm Rotmans Institute that was created that was responsible for maintaining the population statistics. And that lasted until 1926. And so all of those records have been integrated into this database. Now, if you are researching in one of those parishes in Stockholm City, one of those large parishes between 1927 and 1947, you're not going to find that person on this index because there were no original congregation records and the Rotmans Institute didn't exist. So we're going to look at this Nils Nelson that we found in the Swedish-American Church Book in Denver. His American name was Nils Nelson, and that's usually a variation of Nilsson. And it was Verestad. The current spelling is spelled with a V, and we have his birth date. So we can go into the index search, go to the population of Sweden, 1800 to 1947. We can do a simple search or an advanced search. Here I chose to do a simple search. I put in his first name, his birth date, and Verestad. And I get 7 matches. And these are all records from his birth to his immigration. Number 1 is the 1861 to 1866. And then the number 7 is 1886 to 1891. So here is the first one, 1861 to 1866. We have an index record, gives us birth information about where he lived during this period. He was born in 1865. Has a farm name where the family lived. And down here it says the same household. His father was Magnus Nilsson, born August 24th, 1837. And his mother was Ingrid Jansdotter, born July 24th, 1829. And then here is the original record, which you can check to make sure that the index is correct. Now we can go on to the next record for 1866 to 1870. And here we see that there's now 2 more siblings that have been added. Also, there's a notation that the father died on the 17th of September, 1869. So we're going to look at this in a few minutes. But we continue going through the household records. We see that he departed for North America in 1888. And that was the same date that was in that Swedish-American Church Book. So the index search, we've got the births, marriages, and deaths. Again, for the births, we have all of the birth, marriage, and deaths for Kronoberg County from the 1600s up until about 1900, most of Värmland County, then 80 parishes in Södermanland. So these are all from the 1600s up until around 1880 to 1900. Then Jämtland from the 1600s to 1860. We also have all the births for all of Sweden for the years 1750 to 1840 indexed by name. Also, all the marriages 1800 to 1840 for all of Sweden are indexed by name. So look for the birth records. We can go to index search, go under birth index. There's a simple search or the advanced search. The advanced search is by the name, the birth, the baptism, father's name or the mother's. And then down at the bottom, there is more information about the birth index. And then there's a link that gives you a listing of all of the births that have been updated, that have been indexed. And it's organized by lawn or county, for Shamling or parish, and then the years. So let us search for Nils' birth record. Now and he was in Kronenberg, so these have been indexed. So actually, I put a simple search, Nils, and then his birth date, and then Virestad, and I get one match. And here is this beautiful index record with his name, date of birth, date of baptism, his birth location, actually the place where he lived, the farm where he lived in the parish, the page number, it's a cross-reference to the page in the household examination book. You don't always see that, but that's very helpful. Also the birth parish, the father's name, Magnus Nilsson, his occupation, homeowner or independent farmer. Mother, Ingrid Jansdatter, her occupation is H, or an abbreviation for Huster, a wife. She was 34 years old, and it even has the name of the minister who baptized the child. So all of the information is actually transcribed into the index, except for the baptismal witnesses and the churching date, the date that the mother re-entered the church after the birth, which is usually 6 weeks afterwards. So here we have Anders Svensson, one of the witnesses, and also Karin Jansdatter. So then we can search for a marriage record. And for marriage records, we can go index search, marriage index. And then again, there's actually, you can click to find out what marriage records have been updated or indexed. But here we're going to search for Nils's parents' marriage record, Magnus Nilsson and Ingrid Jansdatter in Virestad. Did a simple search, Magnus Nilsson, Virestad, and then I did a wild card for the bride. I put ING. I get 5 matches, and the second one is the one I want. I click on that one, and here I get the date of marriage. I get information about the groom, his first name and last name, his occupation, which is abbreviated, the place where he's living within the parish, also a cross-reference to the household book. Then also the bride, her name, also where she's a farmer's daughter, and the place where she's living. Also, there's some extra information. We have the first date of the banns, which was October 18th, 1863, says that the mother gave written permission for the consent for the marriage. There's additional information in the marriage record. It says the groom and the bride's birth years, and also it's the first marriage for both. So again, it's always important to look at the original record because often you're going to find additional information. Now we saw that Magnus Nilsson died in 1869. Again, we can go into the index search. Now we look at the death index, and you can do a simple or advanced search. I'm doing a simple search for Magnus in Virestad Parish in 1869. And I could have put the whole date in there, might make it faster, but I chose to do it this way. Also, there is a reference to all of the death parishes that have been indexed. So I get 12, but I want Magnus Nilsson, who was actually died September 17th, 1869. I click on that one, get the index for him. It says Magnus Nilsson, homeowner or independent farmer, his date of death, the location, the place where he lived in the parish. Also, he died of nerve fever. He was married, he's male. And then here's the source. Now there is some additional information such as burial date, also his age, 32 years and 23 days, but the cross-reference was actually in the cross-reference to the page in the household examination book. So again, you're going to find additional information by looking at the source. Okay, after the church books, usually the next set of records that people look at are the estate inventories, because they contain a lot of additional information that can help you get a better understanding of how your ancestor lived. The estate inventories are really divided into 2 parts. The first part is called the ingress or the preamble. It gives information about the deceased and names its heirs, and then it's followed by the inventory of all the assets and debts. Now, within ArkivDigital, you're going to have newly photographed color images of all of the Swedish estate inventories for all of Sweden from the earliest times. And there are some in the late 1600s, up until 1960. But more than 6 million of these estate inventories have now been indexed by name. So here we go to index search. We select index source estate inventories. And again, you can do a simple search or an advanced search. And again, there's a link to the page with the updated list of indexes. And that's organized by county and then the court archive or the district or the city within that particular county, and then the years. So we're going to look for the estate inventory for this Magnus Nilsson, who died on September 17th, 1869 in Virestad. And here's one search method. I'm using the advanced search. I put in Magnus Nilsson. I put in the from year 1869 to 1870. Now he died in September. The estate inventory was supposed to be done within 3 months. Often it was done later. So it's good to, if you started with 1869 to 1869, didn't find the person, it's good to expand the years. In the 20th century, I have actually found estate inventories 3 or 4 years after the person died. So it is good to be flexible in those years. Also, then I put the county. And I get 4, and the one I want is 1870, and I have where he was living. So here's the index record. Now, the entire estate inventory has not been transcribed. Maybe that will be happening down the road, but this is what we have at this point. But at least this makes the search very easy. You can go right in there and find the estate inventory. We've got the first name, the last name, the occupation. The archive founder is really the district court where the estate inventory was filed. Again, we have the place where the estate inventory was conducted, which was his home, in the parish, the year that it was done, and then also some extra information that says he was married. And then just to sort of transcribe part of the ingress, it says the estate inventory was performed at Sandsholt, Österjord, in Virestad Parish on the 4th of January, 1870 for the deceased homeowner, Magnus Nilsson, who died on October 17th. Now notice in this estate inventory, the death date was noted incorrectly. So if you do see an inconsistency of the death date, you need to take it from the death record. That's the primary source. It says he was survived by his dear wife, Ingrid Jansdotter, and their 3 children. Nils, born April 6, 1865. Daughters Christina, born 21st of October, 1866. And Signal, born the 6th of October, 1868. And then there were 2 guardians that were assigned to protect the inheritance of the children, Peter Jansson and Sven Carlson. So you see that we're indexing these Swedish church books and then also these estate inventories. And these are really usually the first 2 set of records that people look at when they jump the pond. But we're also have quite a few census that you can search by name. And you find this by going into index search, and you go under index source, and you see that you can index search. There's a census of Sweden, 1940, 1950, 1960, 1970, 1975, 1980, and 1985. And this is where you can search for anyone living in Sweden almost toward the end of those years. And this is very helpful if you're really trying to identify living people, relatives who stayed, descendants of people who stayed within Sweden. You notice I've got 1970 and 1980 in yellow because those have just been added. In fact, 1980 was just added yesterday, and then the 1970 was added last week. So here's an example, and this is for Astrid Lindgren. She is the author of the Pippi Longstocking books. So her birth date was 1907, November 14th, and here is the 1940 census. Here I get an index record, gives her birth information. It says she was married, also has the place where she was living in 1940 in Stockholm, Gustav Vasa Parish, and then below the other members of her household, her husband and 2 children. And then here, there is a link to the original record. Now, if you go to the 1950, you're only going to get a an index record because there's information that is still considered private under the privacy law. So here, but we do have an index record, and it says that she was a married female, it gives her marriage date, her occupation and publishing, and then there is a link to the birth book for her birth record, and then shows the other members of the household, Nils. So sometimes people, if they do see it, you can correct these records because there is an original source to it, but we don't have a link to that. Okay, this is the 1960, and now it shows that she was a widow. She became a widow in 1952, and again to link to the birth book. And also there is an original record, which we don't have access to on ArkivDigital. Okay, 1970, this was just added. Again, it shows she was a widow and that she was sort of an editor of publishing. And here, there is no correction because this is from the original source. And again, there's a link. This is 1975. Again, the same information. And then here is 1980. And then lastly, we have 1985. So this is very nice if you're looking for people living in Sweden or people who were living in Sweden during the 20th century. So what is coming? Well, I don't know whether I thought I could say this. I had a slight 1990 census record will be coming. We're going to be indexing the death records for 1750 to 1799. That's planned. Continue to update the estate inventory index and also updating other indexes. And then also prior to the pandemic, people could order court records and then they would be actually scanned online within about 45 days. It's planned that that would possibly open later this year in 2022. Okay, don't forget to check our blog, Facebook, and YouTube videos. In our blog, and also in our Facebook, that's where you're going to see updates as to the new records and the new indexes that have been added. We usually have a blog that's published on Monday and it's posted in Facebook on Mondays in English. Again, this is a book, Explore Your Swedish Heritage. Learn more about using ArkivDigital. And you can go to our homepage, and here is where you click the link to purchase the book. And there's also a beginner package for 3 months subscription service for $9.95, which is about $103 US.